How the fuck do you do this? What is up, guys? It's me, Dust Minister, back with a new video for you guys. And as you can already tell, this is going to be a very different video from what I would normally do. In this video, I'm going to talk about the definitive edition. You probably already know because you read the title. I'm going into what I think about this, what I want to happen, and what my worries is with this definitive edition coming out. When this news dropped, I was hyped. This is going to be great. And then something started creeping in, which was I also started being a little worried. I think it's just basically because I'm afraid. I am actually really afraid that Relic is actually going to mess this one up. I don't know if it's paranoia or if it's just because I'm super invested into this game and I actually want Relic to please not mess this one up. Regardless though, if you're new to my channel, hi, my name is Dust Minister. I am a Dawn of War Soulstorm caster. I've been casting for around a year. I'm also one of the main two hosts who actually hosted the Dawn of War World Championship 2024. And I'm also going to make another later this year. I've been playing Dawn of War Soulstorm for around when COVID started, but I obviously played it back in the day when I was actually a kid. So I have a lot of love for this game, and I really, I'm kind of low-key passionate and a bit obsessed, maybe. I just love Dawn of War Soulstorm, okay? It's just how it is. I also play Dawn of War Soulstorm a lot. I hover around, at least according to DAO stats, the high end of the 1700s or the very low end of the 1800s. So I would be considered kind of a significantly above average player. However, maybe the bar for the average player is a little low, maybe a little. And especially when a community is not that big right now in online multiplayer, it just means that the competition might not be that big. So it is what it is. I have watched thousands of games by pro players. I pretty much only cast pro players. I've been casting several tournaments, including my own tournament, the World Championship, and I am going to cast even more of them. I have a bunch of game knowledge actually at this point. I am not a pro player. I always say this to my viewers. I am not a pro player. However, I do talk to a lot of pro players, a very bunch of different pro players. I talk to some of the best, and this goes for all kinds of pro players who play different races at a very high level. So I would actually say that I know a significant amount of game knowledge compared to most other players. But again, I'm not a pro player. I keep saying this. I talk to pro players about maps, matchups, the race, and how the race works in high levels of play. I actually talk with pro players about many things. The reason for that is that when I'm doing my casts, I actually have some sort of game knowledge, and obviously also putting in my own opinions. Now, and the Relic now, getting this critical location. This matchup is considered by some pros slightly favored, and I mean ever so slightly favored to IG.
This matchup is definitely favored towards orcs. I used to think otherwise, but I'm not doing it anymore. It's definitely favored towards orcs.
So guys, without further ado, I want to talk about how this video is going to be. So this video is going to consist of 4 sections. The first section is going to be the history of Relic and why I think we got here in the first place. The second is going to be what we know right now of the definitive edition and what I think about it. And what do we not know, which is just as important. Thirdly, I am going to make my letter to Relic. So yes, if there is a guy from Relic who, for some godforsaken reason, is actually watching this video right now, then hopefully you'll hear my letter, and then hopefully you will take something with you. Please take the whole thing, because it's actually, And then the 4th section is actually going to be kind of my predictions, and I'm probably going to end on a negative note, where I actually talk about my worries about why Relic could mess this one up, and what are the potential dangers of what Relic is going to do. The reason why I do this kind of big video here is actually mainly because I feel like there's already a lot of information out there, and there are like so many YouTubers who have already talked about this definitive edition and what can we expect, you know, all that kind of jazz. But I feel like this topic actually deserves more in-depth look at this, and I actually want to talk about some of the context that actually is going into this whole thing in general. So yeah, I'm basically doing a Dusty Minister classic when I do these kinds of videos, and I don't do them very often, but when I actually do them, I want to actually dig a little bit deeper than what most YouTubers would do, and I'm just crazy like that, I guess. In this video, I want to make two disclaimers. One, if you put a comment or you don't like a take that I have or a way that I see things, it's completely fine to disagree or agree. It's also good that you put your own thoughts into what you hope for and what you believe that Relic should be looking into. But if you have something that you disagree with, or that you are very passionately disagreeing with, or whatever it would be, just know that maybe, just maybe, my opinion actually has to do with something earlier in the video. So that's right, I actually have timestamps down in the description. So if you guys just want to hear my take, or if you guys just want to, you know, get into the nitty-gritty, you know, what you would consider the good stuff, then you do that, you do yours. The second disclaimer, and it's just a little bit of a trigger warning, if you don't like this kind of stuff, that's fine, but I will get borderline, I wouldn't say I go over the line, but I will go borderline political on this one. Personally, I don't think I'm going to be very triggery, but if there's some people who's a little sensitive to politics, then just know I will go borderline political on very, very, very few sections. So yeah, just know that that's how I roll. But guys, without further ado, let's get into it. The first section is going to be the history of Relics. Let's get into it. Relic Entertainment was founded in 1997 by Alex Garden, Luke Maloney, Aaron Daly, Aaron Campbates. Sorry, Aaron, I probably butchered your name. Rob Cunningham, Gary Shore, and Shane Alfreds. Alex Garden was CEO. Luke Maloney was CTO. Aaron Daly was lead designer. Aaron was lead artist. Rob Cunningham was art director. Gary Shore was programmer, and Shane Alfreds was software engineer. These titles are kind of based on what my research has been for these people. I am sure that there's more nuances, but that's what my research led to. Together, these guys made 3 games: Homeworld, Homeworld 2, and Impossible Creatures. All 3 games was actually relatively successful. Especially the Homeworld games was very, very, very successful and was super original at the time. Homeworld is a sci-fi RTS game, and yeah, it's just very, very special. It's very, very different. It was original at the time. I keep saying that, but it really, really was. Actually doing research for Homeworld actually made me think, like, maybe I should actually try this game. Especially the first one was very, very highly praised, both by the public and the critics. Homeworld 2, not to the same degree, but then again, I wouldn't know too much. Maybe there's actually even more people who is actually playing Homeworld 2. I don't actually know. But regardless though, Homeworld was really successful, and for an indie company, although we'll get to the indie later on, but for an indie company, this was pretty impressive. So Homeworld was a success, and I want to talk a little bit about this whole indie thing here, but because I think that people perceive them being indie. And to be honest, they kind of were an indie company. They still had a publisher in Sierra, which was at the time big publishing company, and they have also been releasing some iconic games throughout the years. But regardless though, Relic was very much an indie company, and they did well from the get-go. This success did actually catch some eyes, and in 2004, they actually got acquired and bought by THQ. More on that later. Alex Garden worked for Relic all the way to 2004, where he orchestrated the sale to THQ. He then moved on to other companies, some which he co-founded himself. He also eventually worked as a general manager for Xbox Live under Microsoft. As for Luke Maloney, he's kind of hard to track down. It's hard to know when he left Relic, but currently he's a venture capitalist with a fund called Space Fund. Yeah, it's interesting, but yeah, I'm not going deeper down that rabbit hole. Aaron Daly left in 2006 and actually managed to work and help design Company of Heroes 1 and its expansions before he actually left. More on Company of Heroes, by the way. He moved on to work as a lead designer elsewhere and currently works as a design producer for Meta. Aaron left in 2002, where he went on to work for EA Games and contributed to games like Need for Speed Most Wanted. He later joined Rob Cunningham to form Blackbird Interactive. More on them later. Speaking of Rob Cunningham, he worked for Relic all the way until late 2007, where he co-founded Blackbird Interactive and where he also worked as a CEO. Gary Shore worked at Relic till the end of 2001. He moved on to EA Games and also joined Blackbird Entertainment for making Homeworld 3. And yeah, more on that later. Shane Alfreds moved to other companies only to change his career into a head coach and working with exercising in general. So yeah, guys, who says you can't change your career completely, right? In 2004, THQ did actually buy Relic. THQ was a massive company. They had been publishing many games themselves, both externally and internally. And then they even had licensed partnerships with Nickelodeon, DreamWorks, Disney, and the WWE. Impressive. Once THQ took over, Relic Entertainment changed their name to THQ, and it actually gave us this iconic intro. By this point, there's only 2 members left who was the founding members of THQ that I know of, which is Aaron Daly and Rob Cunningham. As I already told you, Aaron was a lead designer and Rob Cunningham was actually the art director. So the more artistic OG kind of vibe was still there. Let's just have a talk about what THQ together with Relic Entertainment actually brought to the table. We got banger after banger after banger after freaking banger. By 2004, Relic, together with THQ, dropped the first Dawn of War Warhammer 40k game, and it was so good. I cannot stress enough how impactful and how insane this game actually was. It was different, it was original, and it was really well done. Actually, they took a lot of risk. The resource management system was very different. How the squads would work was different. All the races that was made, it was very different from how other RTS games worked. And it was just so good. I don't want to get too much into how the game works and stuff, because most of you watching right now already know. And if you want to know more about how this game was really impressive in its game mechanics and stuff, you can watch other videos out there. There's some great videos on YouTube. But I want to talk about the influence of this game. I think I picked it up at 2005, 2000-ish, around there, 1 year after the release. And I remember very distinctively some older guys talking about how suddenly a lot of people at my age, granted I was 13 or something, actually started showing up for tabletop. That's right, suddenly tabletop was low-key booming, and this was basically because of this game. This game was amazing, and we actually ended up getting some more and more good expansions. We got Winter Assault, we got Dark Crusade, and we got Soulstorm. We'll get to Soulstorm a little bit later because there's more nuances with Soulstorm, but yeah, just know that Dawn of War was fire. We also got Company of Heroes 1. Now, I didn't know this game before the end of 2000s, but when I picked it up, I was like, this is amazing. This game is absolutely amazing. Company of Heroes and Dawn of War are just so impressive. Both the public and the critics just hands down thought this was absolutely great. Relic did work on other games, but these two specifically alone was basically putting them in the competition with other big companies for being a part of the RTS meta and the competition of RTS in general. Personally, I remember very, very specifically how I was very much into StarCraft Brood War, and I really, really loved Warcraft 3, which was my favorite game. But I remember when Dawn of War dropped, and I was like, man, this might be my new favorite game. But we're actually not done yet. Later on that year, they released Dawn of War 2, which was radically different from the first Dawn of War. I remember when this game dropped, I wasn't very into it, but I think the reason was that Dawn of War 2 was so radically different. It had a completely new system. There was pretty much no base building. It was just fights and battles, and the battle micro mechanics was very, very different, but the game was amazing. Even I can actually look at it and actually appreciate it. And to this day, I'm actually a huge fan of Dawn of War 2. I really respect the game. And I would actually say that the game in general did some things that was crazy to me. The campaign was great, especially the two first campaigns, which was Chaos Rising and just the original Dawn of War 2. I thought it was great. The Tyranids was great. Chaos was great. The campaign was fire. And then they dropped Retribution later on, and you could tell that this game was still amazing, but you could also tell that there was some few things that was kind of cut short. For example, at least to me, it's clear that the campaign is a little bit, it's just not the same as the first two, but more on that later because there will probably a reason for this. But again, we're not done. We also got the release of Space Marine, which is an iconic game. We got that in 2011. And at this point, I'm just like, this game is a third-person shooter game, basically, and it's... Actually, I'm kind of impressed. Like, looking into this, Relic actually released banger after banger, and this error is so ridiculous. And all of this was under THQ. Granted, the first Dawn of War wasn't truly under THQ. It was already in development before THQ, but THQ is kind of, to me at least, the way I look at it, it seems that THQ definitely pushed for it to be the way that it became, basically. Let's talk about Soulstorm a little bit. Sometimes it's actually an elephant in the room when you talk about the first Dawn of War and all its expansions. Dawn of War Soulstorm is probably the one that people are the most critical of. And honestly, I understand why. Personally, I think 1v1 is great. I think that it's, well, the bar is pretty low, but it's the most balanced of all the 1v1 games. My opinion, of course. But the campaign...
Baneblade production? How many do we have on hand?
Unfortunately, sir, a shipment of 100 Baneblade. 100 Baneblade. 100 Baneblades has just gone out to serve.
I see.
Look, rhinos! Rhinos! Our enemies hide in metal boxes, the cowards! The fools! We should take away their metal boxes.
You serious?
Dawn of War Soulstorm was basically being developed by Relic initially. They put out a demo before the release, which was a moment where you could play Dark Eldar, I guess. But it's also very clear that they had to be co-developing with Iron Law, who basically just had the last hand and the last touch on Dawn of War Soulstorm. How I look at it is that it's pretty clear that Relic was changing a little bit. Rob Cunningham did actually leave in 2007 after Dark Crusade, but before Dawn of War Soulstorm, and he's basically the art director. So it's clear that something was going on at Relic, and Company of Heroes was taking a lot of attention. So Dawn of War Soulstorm didn't get the love that it deserved when it came to the campaign. And by the way, the campaign sucks. Like, I'm sorry. To all of you guys who love Dawn of War Soulstorm campaign, all power to you. Don't you ever have someone on YouTube tell you that your campaign that you love so much sucks. However,
Metal boxes!
Yeah, moving on. In May 2012, Relic basically announced, or THQ as they are called, they announced that they were working on the highly anticipated Company of Heroes 2. The game was set to be released very early 2012, but it got pushed and kind of postponed, and it's very clear as to why it did. When Retribution being cut a little bit short here and there on some of the development, and also Company of Heroes actually being postponed a little bit, it was clear that something was very, very wrong at THQ. And later on, in November 2012, we got our answers. THQ filed bankruptcy under Chapter 11, and it was very, very clear that the economy was really, really struggling at THQ. When the bankruptcy was filed, 2 months later, a lot of the property that THQ had was actually being sold out to other companies. In January 2012, THQ and its properties was sold to 2 other companies by an auction. Pretty much everything here was actually acquired by SEGA, which we'll talk about later on, by the way. But then there was another thing that actually got acquired by Gearbox Software, which had the developer Blackbird Interactive. That's right. Some of the older members that left Relic wanted to actually work on Homeworld 3, and we'll get to that later. When Sega acquired Relic Entertainment actually changed to their original name. They were no longer known as THQ because they got bankrupt, right? So Relic Entertainment was back with their OG name, and they were going to develop further some of these games that was going to happen. This period of time for Relic, yeah, we'll get into that. This period of time doesn't start off that bad, actually. We get Company of Heroes 2, which is, in my opinion, an even better version of Company of Heroes 1. There's actually a little bit of a debate. There's some people who's way more enthusiastic about Company of Heroes than I am, so I'm not going to speak for them. But for me personally, Company of Heroes 2 was an even better version, and I think it's an absolutely amazing game. The thing is that Company of Heroes was already developed for a long time before it actually got released. It got released half a year later than it was supposed to. It had been developed for more than a year, actually, 1.5 years, I think, and potentially even more, potentially 2 years before it actually got released. So how much of a hand Sega had in this one is pretty questionable. They were just basically publishing the game, and maybe they had something to do with it. And I know you might say that they are a publisher, but they're basically owning Relic Entertainment at this point, so there's no way that they had no influence whatsoever on this game development. Company of Heroes was great, but later on, we got this amazing banger of a game. Dawn of War 3 is probably the most catastrophic game of Relic Entertainment. Granted, the bar for Relic Entertainment is really high, but I cannot stress enough when this got released how much people really did not like this game. This game was very, very different. It was very, very messy, and it was very, very clear that at the time when it got released, there was an interest in actually kind of learning from other games at the time, and especially MOBAs. It's very clear that this game was developed in a time when RTS was struggling really, really badly, and Relic took a very, very big risk. And again, I feel like this is the DNA of Relic at this point. They take so many risks. They have taken many, many different risks. They started with Homeworld, which was very, very, very different and original. They did Dawn of War. They did Company of Heroes, which also to some extent was very different from what RTS normally was. They basically took Dawn of War, completely reworked the idea of it, Dawn of War 2 and all of that. So the risk making of Relic Entertainment has always been there, but this one, instead of hitting bullseye, this one was basically hitting someone else in the room. This game is basically an abomination, and I cannot even comprehend how bad most people actually thought this game is. Again, it's very, very important for me to actually say this. If you love Dawn of War 3, and honestly, that's cool. But if you do that, all power to you. Again, don't let any YouTuber get in here and actually tell you that your game that you're loving so much sucks. I'm not gonna say it. Just on a personal note, this game was not good, and it was, yeah, it was not. In 2019, though, something happened in the world of RTS. And one of them was that World's Edge was being established and founded, and it was basically going to handle the Age of Empires franchise. We'll get to Age of Empires later on, but it's very, very clear to me that when they basically made a definitive edition for Age of Empires 2, something really, really different was going to happen. In 2001, 4 years before Dawn of War 3 was released, a new game was released, which was Age of Empires 4. Age of Empires 4 was co-developed with World's Edge, but Relic had a pretty big hand in this one. The game was very, very highly praised, both by critics, by reviewers, and by players themselves. And to this day, Age of Empires 4 is actually like low-key very successful. It was very, very innovative in the way that a lot of people always mention how the civilizations are very, very distinct from each other. And this game keeps on getting new additions of races and stuff. And yeah, people are loving this game. It's true that when you compare it to Age of Empires 2, it might be a little bit underwhelming, but there's no way in hell that you can look at Age of Empires 4 and at least not appreciate how well it actually is done. But then again, if you disagree, all power to you. The thing is about this is SEGA had pretty much nothing to do with this. Now, Relic was owned by SEGA, but it's pretty clear to me that Relic was working with World's Edge, and this game wasn't even published by SEGA. It was published by Xbox Studio, which basically was under Microsoft. So it was not even fully developed by Relic, it was co-developed, and it was published by a completely different company. And then in 2023, we got a new game, which was Company of Heroes 3. This game was just like Dawn of War 3, super, super highly anticipated, and it flopped. Granted, it wasn't as bad as Dawn of War 3 whatsoever, but a lot of people, as in a lot of people, was not a fan of this one. A lot of people complained about the textures and how this game looked, but most people didn't even like the gameplay to some extent either. People complained about certain features in this game. I haven't played this game, so I'm not gonna act like I'm some next level expert on this one, but it's very, very clear to me that people was not happy about this one. This whole period with SEGA is kind of a dark age, and I think that while it's very hard for me to scapegoat SEGA too much, I don't think it's a coincidence that pretty much everything that they published was kind of garbage. They were probably very deep into the Company of Heroes 2 development of the game, so it's hard to say that SEGA actually had a hand in that one. I know. I can't just trash on SEGA and scapegoat them. But you know what? I'm gonna do it anyway. Is it really a coincidence that pretty much some of the worst games, we'll get to that later though, but some of the worst games that Relic has probably released is all by SEGA's time? I don't think it's a full coincidence. But then again, I'm not in there. I'm not there developing with the guys. I have no idea what the business or the developing situations are, I have no idea. But I know this. Big companies, and this is where it gets a little political, big companies are just really not caring about the little guy. And you might say, oh, are you going to be like bashing big companies? Well, kinda I am, but it's just how the world is put together. When we live in a world that is capitalistic just in general, you have to go by the rules of capitalism. If you are a big company at this point, you have to understand that there's no way that they could actually do it different. Big companies are not like a bunch of evil people sitting on a board just acting like, oh, we care about profit and we don't care about people. We just want the Skrilla. The problem is that even though people on the board in a big company could be the nicest guys on planet Earth and be so caring about the little guy and the consumers and all of that, but if they're not ice cold and relentless and focusing on profit and profit alone, they might actually get outcompeted by other companies who's not caring about that whatsoever. You might say that there should be a causality between how good a product is in terms of quality and then the revenue and the profit that these companies are gaining. But it's not that simple. In fact, there are many examples of people actually releasing bad quality in pretty much every single situation, and it's still sales. There are other variables like branding that has literally nothing to do with how the game is produced in terms of quality. There are many, many things that has absolutely nothing to do with the quality of the game. So yes, there's definitely a causality between the product and its quality and sales and revenue and profit, top line and bottom line. There's definitely a causality, but I'm just telling you that it's way more indirect than direct, and you have to keep that in mind. Big companies will always have a situation where the little guy gets stepped on because the most interesting thing for them is profit. You can ask so many developers of this. You can ask Riot Games. Oh, Jesus Christ. I used to play League of Legends at some point, and yeah. Moving on, I don't want to talk about Riot Games. We got EA Games. Oh my god. And we got Blizzard. And this is just some examples of big companies just messing up the game and just being like, not caring. Now, is Sega even close to being as bad as these three? Not exactly. And for my money, Sega is probably not the worst of the worst whatsoever. And also, these businesses, I can't compare them one to one because they operate on different scales and how they work as companies and how they're organized. But they're still big companies who has something to do with decision makings of how a game is developed, either directly or indirectly. And also, to my knowledge, Sega is not, we know a little bit here and there that there's some pretty real signs that, yeah, Sega has some issues here and there, but it's just happening. Big company, that's how it is. You are competing with other big companies. It is just what it is. It's not them being stupid or evil or whatever the hell you would say about them. It's just the nature of the environment that is given to them when you are a big company. It's literally just how it is. So yes, I will say that I'm pretty certain that when Sega was in here, it is very, very clear that they had other interests. I am sure there's other nuances. I'm sure we can go into other stuff. THQ was also a very, very big company, so maybe my analysis is wrong here, but that's my take. But then we got some news dropping. We got something that I remember when it got dropped, that it actually went over some in the community's head. And what was surprising to me was not too many people, there were definitely some, but not too many people talked about this news. By around 2022, 2023, it was very, very clear that the gaming industry was changing and there was some economical developments that needed to be done. By 2023, Relic was actually getting some of its staff cut and their staff was being made redundant. Sega was basically reconstructing a little bit, was cutting here and there, And it was very, very clear that Sega needed to refocus a little bit. And by 2024, Sega sold Relic to a external investor, and we'll get to that. This news was massive. I remember when I read this, I was like, man, are we getting some updates? Are we getting reworks here and there? Are we getting a revamp of the game? Are we getting balances? Are we finally getting a ladder? What are we getting here? And I remember talking to Jagus Art, another content creator who is not here right now, sadly. We love you, Jagus. Please come back. But I was getting a little worried because there was no news dropping or whatsoever. And we were into 2025 and we were getting kind of deep into 2025. And then it finally dropped. I am so hyped. I am so happy. I cannot wait to get into this. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about the external investor that Relic got. So let's look into that. So the external investor is called Emona Capital. Emona Capital is an investment fund, basically, that basically is investing in other companies to obviously gain value out of them, simply put, basically. Emona Capital actually have a focus. It's not just random stuff that they invest in. They have a particular focus on technology development and the gaming industry. If you look at their portfolio, they have basically invested in 4 companies. The first one is Amber Studios, which is basically a game development agency company. And they have apparently worked with Epic Games, Warner Bros, and also Disney of all things. The other one is Secret Mode, which is a gaming company set in England. They have produced certain different games that I don't know much about, but I mean, you can look for yourself and then see if you recognize anything. And obviously they also acquired Relic, but then funnily enough, there's also a 4th company that we are recognizing right off the bat, which is Blackbird Interactive. It's kind of funny how people left Relic and then they ended up with the same capital investor. As I already stated, Rob Cunningham, I still mess up his name, and Gary Shore actually ended up working on Homeworld 3, and it was a disaster. I don't want to dig deeper into this because it doesn't have much to do with Relic other than certain people who used to work for Relic is in Blackbird and suddenly they are under the same investor. Yeah, I just found it funny. That was, yeah, small world. There's a thing here where I am, however, a little confused. When I look at these articles that's writing about Emona Capital and how they have acquired Relic, and Relic is suddenly going back to their indie roots, I always, yeah, I just question what are these people saying, because it's not an indie company. Indie means independent. I'm sorry, but Relic is not independent. When you have an investor that is basically putting money into your company was let go by Sega. They took over from Sega, and we don't know what that means. Again, I don't know if Emona Capital is something bad, but as I already told you, Blackbird and Homeworld 3 didn't go that well. And again, we can probably put most of the blame, which is not, I mean, these guys are working hard. I'm not gonna act like these people are incompetent. But as we could see, Homeworld 3 didn't go that well. I don't know if Emona Capital is anything interesting. I don't know how hands-on they are of the products, but I do know one thing. They care about money, that's for sure. I don't know, however, how hands-on Emona Capital is. And, you know, Homeworld 3 could probably just be a fluke. I don't know how much Emona Capital had to do with that. And so the future and how Definitive Edition and so on will work will obviously depend on Emona Capital. But honestly, I don't think it has to do much with what is going to happen with the Definitive Edition. But however, what I will say is that we might get a Dawn of War 4. And that's where this leadership will be tested truly. And that's where we're going to see if this deal and this whole thing was a good thing to begin with. Now, before I dig deep into what Dawn of War Definitive Edition is going to be like, I actually want to talk a little bit about, and I'm going to go back a little bit of a time, because I talked about how THQ did a transition. When THQ acquired Relic, they basically got some new staff for obvious reasons. I don't have full information on what the staff members are for Relic at this point, and it's pretty impossible because I could probably go I could probably dig very, very deep, but I'm not going to do it because it's just too much work. However, we do know this. Philip Bull, who is actually in many different interviews, is apparently the head of development for Dawn of War 1 at least, and he might be as well for Dawn of War 4. He was for Dawn of War 3 as well, but then again, I mean, companies do make mistakes, and I hope that he's going to deliver on an upcoming Dawn of War 4 if we hopefully get that. But speaking of Dawn of War 1, he will be the head of development for that one. We also know that the guy who probably took over from Rob Cunningham back in 2007 is Matthew Kosminski. I'm sorry, I'm not good with names, and especially not in a different language. But yeah, it looks like it's him. Other than that, I don't know these people, but they were around when Dawn of War, Dark Crusade, and Soulstorm was being developed, and they were also around when Company of Heroes 2 was really, really good. So I obviously think that these people are very, very competent. We also know Ian Thomas, who has worked on Impossible Creatures and its expansions. So he's been around for a very, very long time. So it's very, very clear to me that it looks like there's still a lot of the OG DNA when it comes to Dawn of War games. So very excited for Dawn of War 4, hopefully. And I'm also very excited to see what is going to happen with the Definitive Edition. But without further ado, guys, let's get into this Definitive Edition. Let's wrap this one up. Okay, perfect. Now, guys, let's get into what we actually know right now and what we can work with right now. So we have a couple of interviews of Philip Bull, who is the head of the development of Dawn of War 40K. And we also have a bunch of information on Steam. What I want to go into is the FAQs of what we know, and then maybe I will refer to some of these interviews, but I don't want to go into them too much. Let's just look at the FAQs, right? So if you go on Steam and you go into the page of Definitive Edition, you can get into this announcement here, and then you will find a couple of informations. Let's break these one down, shall we? So what is included in the Definitive Edition? Everything, all in one game. So it's basically all the expansions in one. 4 classic Dawn of War campaigns, 9 classically depicted Warhammer 40k army, and then over 200 maps. So absolutely great, right? What's new and what's improved? This is pretty important, right? So we've got 40k widescreen support. I cannot tell you how massive this is. Dawn of War is created at a time when 40k widescreen support wasn't really a thing. And I would actually say that by when Soulstorm came out, it was actually kind of dated. And so this widescreen support here is so important. It's going to help on graphics. It's going to help on just in general how the game looks. It's going to help in terms of how the camera will be. Just we'll get to that later on. It's going to help on everything when it comes to the visuals and the graphics. Just in general, it's just going to be better. So this one is massive. Upgraded unit and world textures multiplied the original 4 times the original, so that's great. And then this one, which is the one that everyone is talking about, upgraded from 32-bit to 64-bit platform. there is a bunch of people who talks about how massive this is, but there's also some people who don't quite understand how insane this is. There are games that still to this day is suffering a lot on newer systems because they work on a different kind of bit system. Now, I'm not going to act like I'm some technical nerd, but it basically is, if you have a 64-bit platform, it just means that you can work with more data just in general, and it will just make it so the systems in general in the game are more fluid. They're easier to work with, so when you're also modding and stuff, I'm not a modder, but when you're also modding, it also gives you some other opportunities, and it will, which is pretty important, also mean that there are certain things that Relic can actually do if they want to change the game or balance the game or anything like that. So the impact of what this will have on how the game will function is everything. There will be some people watching this video who can talk more in depth with why this is really, really good, because I'm not a technical nerd. I just know that this is just so good on every single level. Moving on. Compatible with 20 years of loving crafted mods with better mod management in-game. This is also massive, and looking at the interviews in how they did this, they basically, as far as I understand, tested all the mods out there. They downloaded them and tested how they would work with Definitive Edition, and according to them, it's going to be great. I was a little skeptical on this because I have no idea how it will work, and I am not sure if it would work, but I've actually talked with a bunch of modders, and not just for this game, but in general, people who's modding. This shouldn't be a problem, because the things that, like, it's really hard to mess up a mod, so unless you're, like, rewriting the game fundamentally, this shouldn't be a problem whatsoever. So this is massive. One thing that Dawn of War is mostly known for is actually the mods. It's one of the greatest games when it comes to modding. So this right here is so important and so good, because if Definitive Edition gets in here and the modders are just getting trashed, this would be a complete disaster. And so I'm very happy that Relic understands this. Image-based lighting enables a higher level of fidelity while retaining the classic experience. Okay, good. Improved world lighting, unit reflection, improved shadow. So just more into how the game will look. It's really, really important for Definitive Edition, obviously. And then this one is also, Jesus Christ. Improved gameplay camera shows the battlefield like never before. The camera in the old game, and this ties a little bit into the widescreen thing, it's so zoomed out or zoomed in that excuse me, it's so zoomed in that it's really obnoxious, and I would actually say it's unplayable. You basically have to use the camera mod that DAOstats, shout out to DAOstats, we'll get to them later, but you'll basically have to use the camera mod, otherwise this game, at least in my opinion, is freaking unplayable. And then increased draw distance allows for more cinematic experience. HUD and screen layout optimized for widescreen viewing. So obviously the HUD is basically like where you click on units and stuff. It's basically like the bar or whatever is, yeah, the things you can click on and stuff. So that's the HUD. And they've optimized that for widescreen. That is really, really good. Okay, so already looking fire. New players can experience where this classic franchise began, blah, blah, blah. So Definitive Edition will be releasing later this year for PC on both Steam and GOG. Okay, wishlist it today. Be sure to follow our social channels, blah, blah, blah. Let's get into the FAQ. So, where is Warhammer 40k Dawn of War Definitive Edition, or when is it coming out? Again, they're saying it release later this year, 2025. This might be postponed. Just know it. It can always happen. We don't know what this means. We have no idea if this is like August, if this is September, or if this is like borderline January 2026. We have no idea. But they are saying at least it's going to be within 2025. So that's great. I hope that they finish the product instead of just putting it out, because they made the statement here. What platforms will Warhammer 40k Dawn of War Definitive Edition be available for? Definitive Edition will be available for PC on Steam. Yeah, so it's just PC. That's great. No more. Don't focus on some random stuff like Xbox and stuff. I know some people like playing RTS on Xbox, but it's good that they just focus on this. There's no reason to try and delve into other platforms. How much will Warhammer 40k Dawn of War Definitive Edition cost? This is what we don't know. All they just say is that we don't have a final price. There's some people who talk about what price they think, but honestly, I don't think we actually know. The gaming market will always be changing, so will the prices. Inflation has gotten into the mix as well, so we don't exactly know how this will go down. What languages? This is massive. This is huge. Don't look over this. This is so important. What languages will Dawn of War Definitive Edition support? We'll have more news on all the language options for Warhammer 40k Dawn of War Definitive Edition closer to its release date. The reason why this is massive is because, and we'll get to that later on, Dawn of War has a massive Russian player base. I would say that right now the community is mostly full of Russian players. Just in general, Eastern European players, like Polish players, Russian players, and Belarus. There's more like Bulgaria, whatever. Like a lot of Eastern European countries. If you look at it, like just in general, the Warcraft 3, they have a big pro player scene. A lot of them are Eastern Europeans if they're not from Asia. So it's very, very clear to me that Steam can't just overlook these countries when it comes to actually looking at the languages. France and Germany and Great Britain are also player bases that needs to be looked at, but there is for sure some focus that needs to be done, especially on the Russian community. And I know there's some politics in here, and we'll get into that later on. Let's see here. Is the minimum recommended specification on Steam store page accurate? This is a conservative preliminary minimum specification. They're not that high, the requirements, so I would say that this should be completely fine, at least in my opinion. Will you be adding any new content or post-launch DLC? This could also be very important, right? But the answer is no. Our focus is on delivering the ultimate Dawn of War experience when we launch the Definitive Edition later this year. That means everything players know and love from the original game, all in one package. We'll keep an eye out for critical issues or bugs that needs to be addressed after launch, but our primary goal is to optimize Dawn of War for modern hardware. So I love this. I think this is amazing. I don't want Relic to delve into other stuff and DLC and stuff like that. Don't do it right now. Maybe for future, for sure, but right now, please focus on just optimizing this game. And thank God that Relic is aware of this. Kudos. Does this mean that we'll also get a new version of Dawn of War 2? And then they basically say we can only talk about the games that we have announced. It's just clear, obviously. When will you share more information about the updates and improvements to the game? Over the coming months, we will have lots more to share from the development team in blogs, videos, live streams, blah, blah, blah. So I will probably cover whatever they throw at us later on. And I'm going to probably make a shorter YouTube video. But in general, They don't have more to offer right now, and I will cover it when they actually get into it, but they recommend to go into the Relic Entertainment Discord. I would also recommend that, by the way. So that's what we know right now. I have questions. I have a lot of questions, and I have looked through all the interviews that I can get. I have some questions. When I look into this, I am super hyped. I think this is amazing. This is insane. And also, just remember, as I told you guys, Relic has been working together with World's Edge, who has been absolutely killing it with Age of Empires. And actually, speaking of Age of Empires, because I talked about it in the earlier section, Age of Empires is absolutely killing it, and especially the Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition is insane. It is so good, and I played it. I watched a couple of friends of mine actually playing it. I've actually been talking with a lot of people who actually play Age of Empires 2, and they say it's amazing, that it's actually really good. So I want to talk a little bit about that thing, because Relic has been working together with the World's Edge, and they have seen how that will work. So what is important here is that I hope that Relic will do the exact same thing for Dawn of War. The thing that they need to focus on right now is just optimize the game, and then they can talk about DLC and balance later on. My focus right now is, if they deliver here and they actually make this as good as they're saying, I will just, I'm gonna pop some champagne or whatever. If this goes wrong, I don't know what to do, and more on that in the later section here. But what do we not know? Because that's what I think is the most important. So if we look at Age of Empires 2, they put out DLCs for new contents. For example, say that Relic wanted to make an extra race out of nowhere. Maybe, because I know some of you guys are just loving that. Loving that. I know some of you will really say, give us Tyranids, Tyranids, Tyranids. Please give us Tyranids. Maybe Relic could make a little bit of a, DLC. Age of Empires are already doing that. And you can still play with someone having a DLC. For example, they play Tyranids, but you cannot play Tyranids because you haven't bought a DLC. But then they will still add, just like Age of Empires, balances. So balance will be for everyone. So I hope in the near future that Relic, and this is my personal opinion, I hope that they balance the game and then potentially add new races or DLCs. Don't go crazy. DLCs to new campaigns. Like, we could get a lot of stuff here. Another thing, and this is very important for me, I hope that they fix the goddamn system where, you basically click on, what is it called? Auto match. There you go. And it just loops, and it's just so bad. I want them to kind of do the same as StarCraft 2, where you can just queue up. You're gonna get a specific map. Maybe you can ban out a map or whatever the hell it is. But just please, for the love of God, make it possible to actually auto match. Another thing ties into that, which is a ladder. We don't know how it will work. As far as I understand, is that while Gamer Spy or Spy Games or whatever that used to manage the online stuff on Dawn of War, apparently it's going to be the same system that Relic is applying to other games. So far, I'm hopeful. So guys, there you have it. That's my breakdown of what's going to happen, and some of my input adds to what I think we're missing right now and what I hope they'll look into. Now, I'm going to make a little bit of a prediction here. Will this be a success or will it not be a success? I think this will be a success. I didn't talk too much about it, but one thing that Relic has actually shown already is that they're actually putting out some good stuff right now. They are giving this announcement with Definitive Edition, and I didn't talk about it, but Company of Heroes 3 that I told you guys was not that good when it came out, it has gotten update after update after expansion after update, DLCs here and there, and people really like it. I can tell that Relic has actually put some power into this. They were already doing it when SEGA was kind of backing out, but right now it's just absolutely killing it. This tells me that Relic is kind of back, hopefully. I'm not sure if we'll get the golden age of what they used to do with THQ, but I am very, very hopeful. So, I'm going to make my own participation in what I hope that Relic will do. And I'm going to make a little bit of a letter, an open letter here, which is basically just going to be me talking to you guys about what I hope Relic will do. And Relic, if you're watching this for some godforsaken reason and you've found this little YouTuber being me, then hi Relic, here's my letter. I'm going to break down what I hope you guys are going to do. The first thing that I want you guys to do is do what you already are doing. I want you guys to focus on this definitive edition. Please, please, for the love of God, make sure that the thing you are promising us is actually going to be the thing that is being dropped. I trust in you guys. I think this is going to be great. Other than that, I have other things, but one thing I will say, that if you somehow found my channel before this guy, then I don't know, that's impressive. There's another content creator out there, shout out to Mr. Landshark, who has been casting even longer than me, who has actually made a video on what he thinks should be done here. I am putting his video down in the description. I'm also showing it here on the side or wherever it's going to be, but go watch his video. His focus is mainly on some more casual things and his perspective as a caster. So I'm going to focus a little bit more on the competitive-ish side, and I'm also going to focus on the more balance-ish side and what you can do for the future. But firstly, I'm going to talk about what I want you to also have in the definitive edition, and then we can talk more future stuff. Oh, and everything that Mr. Landshark talks about, I basically agree with him. He just has other priorities than me, but I actually think a lot of the things that he's saying is great. If you guys out there have other things that you want Relic to actually add, please put it down in the comment section so they can actually also be a little bit inspired by the comment section, which is probably already happening on other YouTube channels. So the second thing, beyond just delivering what you have already told us, the second thing, and I've already alluded to it, please add a freaking ladder and auto match. It's actually crazy that we look at DAO stats, and we'll get to DAO stats, by the way, a little later. You look at DAO stats and how they have just been absolutely carrying this whole community. DAO stats is literally like, yeah, I could talk about DAO stats, how great they've been. But yeah, it's actually crazy that DAO stats is the only thing where we kind of have a feeling about an MMR-ish system and how that works, but it's not really accurate, and it's really suspicious. Auto matching will basically fix this. You get to play a player that is as close to MMR as possible that is playing at the same time. So it would be really great if the auto match would happen and the ladder would be picked and picked. That the ladder would actually be created for the game. I cannot stress how important this actually is, because ladders are, and ranks in general, are really healthy for a game. People like competition and people like ranks, and there are so many games. League of Legends is probably the one that's known mostly for this, where rank and what ladder you are, and are you gold, are you platinum, and all of that, that means a lot to a lot of players. I am not saying that we should get to League of Legends kind of level, because that's also a very toxic environment and stuff, but in general, ranking is really important for a game. So I think a ladder would be really good. Auto match, Jesus Christ, please add auto match. and just in general, create a rank-based environment for us who's playing multiplayer. Another thing that I actually want you guys to also look at, it's not mandatory for me, but I know a lot of people would love this, is to get a team rank. So 2v2, 3v3, and 4v4 rank, that would be great if you could also add that. I'm not saying it's mandatory, but I know a lot of casuals and a lot of semi-competitive players who doesn't like to play 1v1, but they love team games. You should add a ladder for them as well if you can. And also, if we do this, it would be really good if you also added a possibility to actually have your clan or your team being a thing. So not only, which is also what I want to talk about, because I want you guys also to make it so we can get a personal like profile on our account on Steam. So when you click on our name or whatever on the ladder, you also get to see a banner we might choose, what is the statistics, all of that. That would be really great. But another thing that I want you guys to do is that you can actually create a clan. And the clan also has a rank, potentially. You can see all the members in the clan and who are these players and all of that jazz. That would be great. And so when you queued up and you played against another team of 4 players, you would have your clan names on top of your other names. I can't show visuals for this. Just get pictures in your head, and hopefully you get the same pictures in your head than me. One last thing that I want you guys to focus on, and this is what I want to talk about with DAO stats. Please, for the love of God, make sure that these guys are not just gonna get completely stomped on. DAO stats has been carrying Dawn of War, at least on a competitive level, on such an insane scale that you wouldn't even understand. They have created camera mod, language fonts. They've basically also made it so you can remove fog. They've created a ladder. It's so insane what they've done. They made statistics and all of that jazz, win rate on each race and stuff. It's so good. I want you guys to actually look at DAO stats and see what you can learn from them, because they've done insane things. Oh, and by the way, speaking of Russians, it's also a Russian site. So I would actually say, yeah, Russians are really carrying this community, whether you like it or not, in terms of this political situation. And that's my last thing. And this might get borderline political, but then again, I put out the disclaimer. It just happens. What is up, guys? This is Dusty Minister, but now I am editing this video. I want to repeat this disclaimer here. If you haven't already noticed it, I am going to go into a political topic. And while I don't think I'm saying anything controversial, at least from a Westerner's perspective, I will say that while there might be a side that might be more upset that I'm making this video, I actually think I can potentially trigger both sides of this debate. I am going into this topic with the utmost respect for everyone, as much as I possibly can, without going completely ballistic on this topic whatsoever, because this is not supposed to be political content. It's just an elephant in a room and I have to confront it. I know, by the way, that I'm saying that I'm going borderline political, but I'm actually going over the line. It's not borderline, it's actually political. So you have been warned. I'm gonna resume the video now. This will get borderline controversial for me to say, because I don't want to talk politics. I really don't. But yeah, there's a war outside and it's a very bloody one, and it's disgusting. And yeah, I could go into my many different opinions. I can shortly say right now, I definitely think that Russia is invading a country without actually doing it for any good reasons. And it's disgusting. And I think this whole political situation is really bad. So just putting it out there, that's my opinion. But I'm not going to sit here and act like Russians, if you are Russian, you are a dumb person and you're supporting Putin and all of these things. I am not going into that direction. I would never ever say this on other people that I don't know and have no idea. I know some Russians who, for example, don't like what is going on right now. So I'm just saying right now, I'm not shooting at Russians. I am shooting at their government and how it's acting right now. Hopefully that wasn't too bad. I know there's some Russians people who's also watching this video. So yeah, I'm sorry, but it's basically just my take, and I wanted to get out there. It is what it is. I have to be political about this. This is just how it is. But the reason why I set all that up, because I don't want this to be an elephant in a room. It is the political situation. It's just what it is. But Relic, for the love of God, if it's possible for you, make sure that Russians can actually buy this game. Russia is a massive community for the Dawn of War community in general. And so is Belarus, by the way, as well. They are also hit by the many sanctions. And I've heard many, many times how Russians actually have issues with Steam, for example. You can't send gifts or anything like that to a Russian if you live not in Russia. And there are many things that Steam, for example, has sanctioned, as far as I understand, on Russians. I've been talking to a lot of them, and it's very, very clear that there are many, many sanctions that actually hurts Russians. I think it's basically how the political situation is, and it is what it is. I'm not questioning why this is a thing, but I hope that Relic can actually see that this should be something that you need to actually market for the Russians in general. If you want to, again, be political about this, which is completely fine, just know that if you in any way, shape, or form, and again, I'm not sure how this one works, but just do understand that if you want to hurt Russia, because you're a Canadian company and all of that, if you want to hurt Russia, it's completely fine that they buy a product and send the money out of Russia to actually get into Canada, for example. I don't know how it works with taxes and stuff like that. I'm not going to act like I'm an expert, but just from a political perspective, it's actually still a good thing to make it so Russians can actually buy this. Damn, I could feel that that section was a little tense, but okay, so with that out of the way, I'm not going to talk about this anymore. I just want to actually talk about elephants in the room instead of just acting like it's not there. Now I'm going to end this video with a little bit of a negative note, which is there's also a part of me who's a little worried about this. Maybe it's just me. I love Dawn of War. I absolutely think this is one of the best RTS, if not the best RTS ever being made. But I just, for the love of God, hope that they don't mess this one up. I really don't think they will. There's too many signs that is pointing towards this being absolutely amazing. The only thing that I will say is I'm more worried as to what will come later on. Will they actually change the balance maybe a little bit? And how will they do it? Will they focus more on DLCs? Will they maybe not even balance the game and just throw in more and more units, and just suddenly you have a massive game that is even worse in terms of balance? Or what are we doing here? Sadly, we have some examples of games. I'm not gonna mention too many. For example, I used to play Heroes 3 of Might and Magic at some point. They made an HD version shit, and yeah, it was bad. It was really, really not good. At least it wasn't the money worth. And obviously we have the absolute abomination of Warcraft 3 Reforged. I know we can't compare them one to one. I understand there's nuances. I don't think Relic in any way, shape, or form is going to destroy the game whatsoever. I think that will be ludicrous, but I am still a little bit worried because it is easy that something could go wrong. And obviously Relic has said that they'll fix any upcoming bugs. I just hope they don't mess this one up. But also on a slighter detrimental side, they could also just ignore certain aspects. They could just trash Stats, who has done so much for even keeping this game alive. They could basically just you know, not implement rankings and just leave it at that. They could do many things in general that would be a little underwhelming, or maybe they forget about certain things that they pretty much should do. Or maybe if they implement that, will that create issues later on? I don't know. I'm not a technical expert. In fact, 98% of me is actually super optimistic, and I think this will be great. There's just a last 2% that is basically saying, please don't mess this one up. I'm just gonna wrap this one up. This video is probably super long. I'm just very passionate about this game. I hope it will work, and I hope Relic will do their thing. Relic, if you're watching this, if you want to reach out to us content creators, please do. We will be more than willing to actually just engage in just a little bit of conversation. If we even get some sort of engagement, that will be absolutely great. If you want us to do content on behalf of you guys, we can also do that. I don't know if you guys are even watching this video. I don't expect you to do, but regardless, whether or not you watch this game, I hope that you can at least feel all the enthusiasm from us in the community, and I hope you will be absolutely killing it. Guys, I'm going to wrap this one up. Thank you guys for watching. Have a good one. Peace.